March 12, 1897. 4:47 in the morning, the winding gear at Usworth Colliery ground to silence as the night shift walked off. John Wilson stood at the pithead, 54 years old, General Secretary of the Durham Miners Association, watching 200 men emerge into the cold darkness carrying empty lamp cans. Behind him, across County Durham's coal fields, 15,000 miners were doing the same thing. They had rejected a 13.5% wage reduction. The coal owners expected capitulation within days. They had no idea what they'd started. Durham's coal economy operated on a quarterly wage system, reviewed every 3 months based on coal prices. When prices fell, wages fell. March 1897 saw coal selling at 4 shillings 9 pence per ton, down from 6 shillings the previous year. The Durham Coal Owners Association, representing 142 collieries, calculated that maintaining current wages would eliminate profits entirely. Their solution was mathematical: reduce wages by 2 shillings per shift for hewers, the men who cut coal at the face. For a miner earning 14 shillings 9 pence per shift, this meant losing nearly £1 per week. For a family of 6 living in a colliery-owned house, it meant choosing between food and rent. Wilson had worked underground for 32 years before injuries forced him to the surface. He understood the calculus the owners were making. They believed miners had no leverage. Coal stocks at the pithead were high. Spring demand was low. The Miners' Relief Fund held £3,200, enough to sustain 15,000 families for perhaps 3 weeks at starvation rations of 2 shillings 6 pence per week. After that, desperation would force them back underground at whatever wage was offered. The first week passed quietly. Miners walked picket lines at pitheads from Seaham to Spennymoor, from Merton to Marley Hill. Their wives organized soup kitchens using pooled resources. Children stopped attending school because families couldn't afford the penny per week fee. The Durham Advertiser reported the strike with clinical detachment, noting that the men appeared determined but orderly, showing none of the violence that characterized previous disputes. What the coal owners failed to understand was that John Wilson had been preparing for exactly this moment for 3 years. Since 1894, he had quietly restructured the Durham Miners Association's financial reserves, creating a strike fund separate from the General Relief Fund. He had established relationships with cooperative societies willing to extend credit to miners' families. He had coordinated with the Northumberland Miners Mutual Confident Association to ensure Northern Pomares collieries wouldn't increase production to fill Durham's gap. Most critically, he had sent representatives to every pit in the county, not with speeches about solidarity, but with account books showing exactly how long they could sustain a complete stoppage. The answer was 13 weeks if every miner contributed every penny of savings. 13 weeks was longer than any previous Durham strike. It was longer than the owners' cash reserves could sustain pit maintenance without production. It was long enough to push coal prices up through scarcity, which would ironically strengthen the miners' position. By the 3rd week of March, the strategic situation shifted. Coal prices in London rose to 5 shillings 3 pence per ton. Industrial users in Newcastle began paying premiums for guaranteed delivery. The Admiralty, which contracted with Durham collieries for warship bunker coal, sent representatives to meet with both sides. Navy coal reserves could sustain operations for 6 weeks. After that, fleet exercises would be curtailed. The implications for national security were not subtle. The coal owners made their first tactical error on March 29th. Representatives from the Coal Owners Association offered to reduce the wage cut from 13.5% to 10%, expecting acceptance. Wilson brought the offer to a mass meeting at the Miners' Hall in Durham City. 3,000 miners packed into the hall and the streets outside. The vote was unanimous rejection. The owners had misread desperation for weakness. What they faced was not desperation, but but cold calculation. The miners knew the economics better than the owners suspected. April brought hardship that tested the union's organization. Families were eating one meal per day. Children showed signs of malnutrition. Several elderly miners died, their deaths hastened by cold houses and inadequate food. The Durham Chronicle published letters from middle-class residents expressing sympathy but urging compromise. Local shopkeepers, facing mounting unpaid debts, pressured the miners to settle. The psychological pressure was immense. Wilson responded with something unprecedented in British labor disputes: public accounting. Every Saturday, the Durham Miners Association published detailed financial statements in local newspapers showing exactly how much remained in the strike fund, how much was being distributed, and most importantly, how much longer they could sustain the stoppage. The current projection was 9 more weeks. It was a calculated gamble, showing strength through transparency. The coal owners made their second error in mid-April. They began evicting miners from colliery-owned housing. The first evictions occurred at Ellamore Colliery on April 14th. Bailiffs removed furniture into the street while women and children stood in the rain. Photographs appeared in newspapers across England. Public sentiment, which had been largely indifferent, turned sharply. Donations began arriving at the Miners' Association from trade unions in London, Manchester, Glasgow. The Dockers' Union sent £500. The Amalgamated Society of Engineers sent £750. The evictions had created martyrs. By late April, coal prices reached 5 shillings 11 pence per ton. The economic pressure had fully reversed. The Owners' Association was now losing more money per day from stopped production than they would lose by maintaining the original wage rates, but they had publicly committed to the reduction. Backing down meant acknowledging that 15,000 miners had outmaneuvered them. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On May 3rd, Lord Londonderry, owner of multiple Durham collieries and one of the most powerful coal magnates in England, broke ranks. He offered his miners a compromise, an 8% reduction instead of 13.5%, with a guarantee that wages would increase automatically if coal prices exceeded 6 shillings per ton. It was capitulation disguised as compromise. Within 24 hours, 6 other major owners made similar offers. Wilson faced his own moment of decision. He could hold out for complete victory, forcing the owners to withdraw all wage reductions. But the strike fund was down to £890. Families were at the breaking point. A prolonged stalemate might achieve moral victory, but practical devastation. On May 6th, he brought Londonderry's terms to another mass meeting. This time the vote was narrower, 1,847 in favor of accepting, 1,203 against. The strike was over. The miners returned to work on May 11, 1897. They had been out for 60 days. The 8% wage reduction meant they had not won outright, but they had achieved something more valuable: proof that unified action worked. More critically, the automatic price adjustment clause meant miners' wages would now track coal prices upward, not just downward. It was the first time in British mining history that owners had accepted contractual limits on their wage-setting authority. The Durham strike of 1897 resonated far beyond County Durham. Within 6 months, miners in South Wales, Yorkshire, and Scotland had negotiated similar price adjustment clauses. The concept of sliding wage scales tied to commodity prices spread to other industries. The strike demonstrated that industrial workers could organize financial resources sophisticated enough to outlast corporate capital. Time equals 400 milliseconds / greater than in a protracted dispute. It was economics as warfare, waged with account books instead of violence. John Wilson continued as General Secretary of the Durham Miners Association until 1915. He watched the membership grow from 40,000 to 120,000 as the model pioneered in 1897 attracted miners who now believed collective bargaining could work. He died in 1915, having transformed Durham mining from a feudal system where owners dictated terms into an industry where workers had contractual power. The 15,000 miners who walked off in March 1897 didn't know they were creating a template for 20th century labor organization. They thought they were fighting for 2 shillings per shift. Time equals 500 milliseconds/. What they actually built was proof that systematic organization, financial discipline, and strategic patience could challenge industrial capital on equal terms. The coal owners never underestimated Durham's miners again. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about ordinary workers who changed the balance of power through extraordinary determination. Real people, real courage. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family worked in the mines. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure. John Wilson and those 15,000 miners don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.